And last night, progressive Democratic Congresswoman Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez used New York's fashion charity event, the Met Gala, to make a political statement. She wore a white dress with a message emblazoned in bold red, "Tax the rich."
You know that this dress has a message for this Met Gala. Tell me about what that is.
It's right there, but it's really about having a real conversation about fairness and equity in our system. And I think that this conversation is particularly relevant as we debate on the budget and reconciliation bill.
For me, what speaks louder is the actual governing and legislating, right? So the stunts like this, I don't know, I don't really think are really effective and come across as a little cringy.
They're all gonna talk about this. So what does that do? Yes, if you're looking at it only from like a selfish point of view, it gets AOC in the press, and if you're a politician, that is incredibly well played, okay? Let's keep it real. But it also gets the message out, and that's why I'm in favor of it. So
I think the message is out there though.
No, but is it out at the Met Gala?
Okay, well, let's start with the facts. Let's throw up this chart on screen here real quick, okay? What do you see here? From 1960 to 2015, has poverty gotten worse? No. Inequality got worse. But inequality got worse only because the rich got richer, not because the poor got poorer. These issues are emotive, and people tend to look at these charts and only see what they want to see. Now, Bernie Sanders is no fool. He avoids using the rhetoric of saying that the rich are getting richer and the poor are getting poorer, because I think he is aware that it is not true factually that the poor are getting poorer. But most people look at a chart like this one and they just see what they want to see. If you look at the bottom of the chart, see the number 0% there? For the poor to be getting poorer, their lines would have to be below 0. Because this is a chart showing average real household income growth. The growth, the percentage growth, they're all growing above 0%, 10%, 20%, and so on. The first time I presented these charts on screen, I received emails written with withering contempt from left-wing people who presume themselves to be much better educated in economics than I am, who said to me, oh, you poor dear, your trouble is you don't understand the concept of inflation. And I had to reply, no, your problem is you don't understand the meaning of the word real. If you look up the word real in the dictionary, the technical use of the term seen at the top of this chart means adjusted for inflation. And this conflict with my audience could not be more ironic, because I opened the discussion by cautioning my audience that they are so emotionally committed to seeing what they want to see, to justifying their beliefs by disregarding the evidence that's right in front of their face, that they're going to continue to misinterpret the facts no matter how plainly I set them out and explain them. And I cannot tell you how many people have looked at this chart and listened to this video and refused to believe the numbers on the chart with one excuse or another. But let me tell you something. The problem with this chart is not inflation. The problem is that it doesn't live up to your ideological expectations of what it's supposed to be. This chart is showing you that the poor are getting less poor in the United States of America, right? But the rich are getting richer much, much more rapidly. Look at this chart. It's very easy to be emotive about this, very easy to be irrational about it. What does this actually show? Yes, this shows that the top 1% have become spectacularly wealthy. They've become much, much more wealthy in this span of time. And note that this chart ends in the year 2007 or 2008. For whatever reason, this is not as current, not as up-to-date a chart. Okay, but what does this show about the poor? The poor are not getting poorer. Between 1960 and the present, inequality has gotten worse in America, but not poverty. Inequality and poverty are two very different things. Right now, in the Democratic primaries, in the debates for who will be the next president of the United States, the debates for who will be the figurehead leader of America's left-wing mainstream party, lies are being told about this constantly. And the problem is not just that those lies, they're factually wrong. The problem is that they're misleading. They really lead to a false perception of what America's problems are and very false assumptions about what the solutions are and what the outcomes will be. The red line on this chart is the really important line. It says consumption poverty. Now, what does that mean? The word consumption has many meanings in English. Consumption poverty. So my university degree, my first university degree is political science. I learned this in the classroom from the textbook. It was covered very briefly in the university education. And then I learned it in the real world when I went to Cambodia and did social science research there in the nonprofit humanitarian sector, okay? The most important way to measure poverty is by people's consumption. So in the United States of America, you might ask questions like, do you own shoes? How many years have you been wearing the same pair of shoes? Do you eat in restaurants? How many times this month have you eaten in a restaurant? How much money in total have you spent eating in a restaurant? And then you have to calibrate the statistics you've got to reflect what is the standard of poverty in that society. In the United States of America, poor people can't eat in restaurants or can't eat there regularly. Poor people have to pack a sandwich and take it with them to save money so they don't eat lunch in a restaurant. Now, this is almost universal. In different societies, you're going to be measuring different levels of poverty. In the United States, it's accepted without questioning it that a person can own a car and still be considered poor. They can have a person who owns a car and owns many pairs of shoes and eats in a restaurant and that they're still poor. So how you calibrate it, where you set the cutoff line for someone being in poverty versus not in poverty is significant. But the way to measure that is by measuring consumption, not by measuring income, not through relative measures of poverty. If you use relative poverty, the bottom 20% of people are then always going to be poor. You get a self-fulfilling prophecy statistically. When we were in Cambodia, I remember debating this with my boss. The measures of poverty he really favored were things like the roof of your house. What is the roof? What material is the roof of your house made of? Which is an interesting measure of poverty. Do you own a cellular phone or not? Things like this. Because his experience with Cambodian society, these were the first things people would spend money on as soon as they had some security, as soon as they had a little bit of income to waste. They would improve the tiling on their roof. That actually has to do with the torrential rain, that it's so loud, it's so noisy, the rain beating down on the roof of your house. So when you look at the red line on this chart, what you see is a dramatic decline in poverty since the year 1960, okay? And the black line, there is some decline, but that's been wavering along. It's relatively stagnant, okay? That sharp decline on the red line, okay? You cannot say honestly that the poor are getting poorer in the United States of America. That is false. Okay? The poor have become dramatically fewer in number, or you can say the poor are less and less poor. However, we are in a period of time in which the rich get richer. Now, there was a quotation I copied out here. So, someone claimed at the latest Democrat Party primary debates that we have had 40 years of no economic growth for 90% of the people. That's not what this chart shows. I'm not the first person to try to debunk these myths. Here's a quotation from the Washington Post by Meg Kelly. The nonpartisan Congressional Budget Office reported that the bottom 4 quintiles, so the poorer 4/5 of society, saw an average income growth of 32% between 1979 and 2015 before transfers and taxes. If you include the difference made by taxes and transfers, then the middle 3 quintiles saw a 46% increase in income. But the poorest of the poor, the lowest quintile saw a 79% increase in income during that span of time, 1979 to 2015. So the rhetoric within the Democrat Party, within the mainstream left, and of course it's even worse on the far left amongst the extremists, the rhetoric has fundamentally become detached from reality. Now, the other canard, the other excuse that's given to direct us away from these facts, and to keep using this meme, this false meme, this misleading meme, that the problem with the United States of America is that the rich are getting richer and the poor are getting poorer. It's not so. Is to say, oh, well, even if you think the poor are doing okay, in Donald Trump's America and the current economy, even if you think that, it's not true because they're working such long hours. They're working multiple jobs. Look at this chart. What do you see about that? What do you see there? It's not true. It is not true. Believe it or not, the rich people are really the purple line. Those are the extremely wealthy. We get several different levels of rich people. Rich people are working longer hours. Okay? I don't find that surprising. In the past, rich people relied on other human beings to help them out. They had servants and secretaries. Increasingly, if you meet people who are millionaires, not multi-billionaires, but just people of over $1 million, they do everything themselves. They don't have a secretary. They don't have a travel agent. They use their computers and they book everything themselves. They do all the work themselves. I think it's really true that, high-income people, whether they be medical doctors or architects or owners of small businesses, they now work very, very long hours, and that's what this chart shows. The people who are working shorter hours are the red line. So the red line here, this isn't the poorest of the poor. You can see if you look at it, this is the relative poor, and this is the majority of society. They are not working longer hours. You can see very clearly the trend, and especially, interestingly, the trend in recent years. So what's the problem with this approach? I'm saying this partly because I want to set up a discussion of issues in a future video, probably the next video I make. The problem is that the quality of life people have in America is absolutely awful. And that problem cannot be solved by raising the wages of employees at Amazon from $14.25 per hour to $15 an hour. It's not going to make that kind of difference. It's not going to make that dramatic a difference for the people at Amazon. It's not going to make that dramatic a difference for the people at Disneyland either. I followed those arguments very closely when Bernie Sanders presented them. And even the particular case studies he presented were really misleading and dishonest. I do completely sympathize with the movement to raise minimum wage. I completely sympathize with it. But, have you been to Los Angeles? Have you been to San Francisco? Why are there huge numbers of homeless people on the streets? It's not because of the difference between $14 an hour and $15 an hour for people who already have a steady job at Amazon or Disney World. It's not. Okay? Obviously, talk to anyone who has real world experience working with the homeless in the 21st century. Obviously, the single most outstanding issue is drug addiction, including addiction to painkillers, as well as, recreational drugs, illicit drugs, illegal drugs, okay? Drug addiction is an enormous vector for homelessness, vagrancy, and extreme poverty in the United States of America. There's no denying it. What is it that makes life so unpleasant for the working poor? So, now not talking about vagrants or homeless people, for the working poor in the United States of America. One of the single greatest issues is public transportation. Los Angeles is hell. Everyone needs to own a car, and working poor people, they may be spending 50% of their income on their car and car-related expenses. Making the down payments on their car and insurance, and yet to some extent fuel. Gasoline's relatively cheap these days. But the cost imposed on them by having a car and the misery of having to drive more than an hour every day back and forth to work, this is a huge cost imposed on the whole of society due to having terrible infrastructure. And this is true in Los Angeles, it's true in Detroit, it's true in many parts of the United States. Life is not like that in the south of France. If you ask, why is the quality of life higher in the south of France? It's not something simple like, it's the minimum wage. It's not something simple like, it's Andrew Yang's crazy idea of having universal basic income. In the south of France, they have a beach. The train goes right up to the beach. You can get out of the train, you can pay $5 to take the train. It's not free, but it's cheap, obviously built at taxpayers' expense, etc. And poor people and rich people alike can take their kid and get on the train and get out and go swimming on the beach. The poor and the millionaires alike all enjoy this, this natural splendor thanks to the government building infrastructure that enables it. Okay? Why is life better in the south of France than it is in Los Angeles? Because of the cost of education, because of the cost of healthcare. I'll just throw this chart up on screen. Everyone knows this, right? This is the misery of modern life in America. And this absolutely will not be broached. It will not be solved. It will not be improved by raising minimum wage, nor through Andrew Yang's, universal basic income proposal. Okay? And this is not even talking about rent. One of the most fundamental miseries in the 21st century is the cost of rent, and no government wants to deal with it. Neither left-wing nor right-wing. Nobody, neither Democrat nor Republican, nobody wants to talk about how you can really help the poor by having, housing that works for them, housing that doesn't require them to drive 2 hours back and forth to their place of employment, housing that doesn't cost them 50% of their income, et cetera, et cetera. This is a huge crushing problem in the United States of America, and it is in some other countries around the world. High rent crisis is not universal, and there are government policies to deal with it, okay? The most fundamentally dangerous element of the left wing blaming the problem on the rich are getting richer, the poor are getting poorer, this factually false meme. Their statement of the problem is misleadingly simplistic. And this is training public opinion to endorse and commit to solutions that are even more misleadingly simplistic. Indeed, in my opinion, dangerously so. Maybe we can practice doing partnership.